everyone. I'm Samara Rivers, founder of Black Bourbon Society, and this is another episode of Whiskey Weekly. On this episode, we are here with Stephen Beam, Master Distiller and President of Limestone Branch Distillery. So we are glad to have everyone here. Thank you guys for all being here, a part of our Whiskey Weekly. Stephen, how are you today?
I'm doing great. The weather's beautiful up here in Kentucky, and I'm kind of envious though. I lived in Atlanta for about 12 years, and it's always got a soft spot in my heart down there. So.
Oh, Atlanta's a beautiful place to live, but it might not be that safe to go outside right now. So you're safer in Kentucky.
Yeah, I think we both have similar views on that going outside and social distancing thing. So.
Right. So, you have the famous name Beam. How does that describe who you are, what your family history is, your lineage and bourbon, the bourbon world, all that stuff?
Yeah, well, so of course I had the last name, but I didn't really grow up in the business. I grew up with the business around me. I had aunts and uncles who were in the distilling industry, in the retail package industry, stores. So I was always aware of the bourbon and the culture of bourbon, but I really wasn't involved that much. That was me. I wasn't really that involved in the industry, but it was something that I always wanted to do. But when I graduated school, I looked into it, but it was right at 1980, which was one of the worst times for bourbon. It was kind of on the downslide, so I kind of shelved that idea and went on with a different career. And then in 2008, when the small distilleries became a viable option, I started following them, and I was like, it's always been my passion, and I'm going to do that. So we began the process of opening the distillery in 2008, and in 2010 we incorporated. By 2011 we were distilling. So, but as far as the family lineage goes, Jacob Beam was one of the first in Kentucky to start distilling. Mm-hmm. I'm seventh generation from Jacob. He came to Kentucky in 1792 and sold his first whiskey in 1795. And what a lot of people don't realize is that he had 3 grandsons that were all in the distilling industry. So the youngest, and actually the most successful at that time, was named John Henry, Jack Beam, and his distillery was Early Times. Mm-hmm. And it was a massive distillery. He died young, and he had one son who died the year after he did. And so that line died with that generation. And Brown-Forman has owned Early Times since Prohibition. And then the middle son the grandson was David, and that was Jim Beam's father. And of course, we all know how that line ended up. Mm-hmm. My ancestor was Joseph, and he was the oldest. And when his father died, he bought the still, and he stayed at the original small Beam distillery. And but he had a son, Minor Case Beam, who the rye is named after. Minor Case, yep. And so Minor Case went to work for his Uncle Jack at Early Times when he was 14. And by 28, he had become a master distiller and saved enough money to buy into another distillery. And then he eventually bought that distillery, and it became MC Beam and Company. And nice. So operated that up until just before Prohibition. So we're the 7th generation. I'm the same from Jacob as Fred No over mm-hmm. So we're the same generation.
Great. And so you became the distiller, the master distiller of Limestone Branch. How has that been, the process of finding your own way in this industry, finding your recipe, finding your sweet spot, in making the best whiskey for Limestone Branch.
Right. So, I still shy away from that term master distiller.
Yes, I know that. That's what I kind of hesitate in calling you that, right?
I feel like my grandfather and my great grandfather, spent a lifetime in the distilling industry, and they were true master distillers. And, I've only been at it for, 10 years. So I think I have a little ways to go before I can call myself a master. But the head distiller, and everything we do, is a reflection of me. And when I first started, I went to work with a friend who had a small distillery and learned the process. I also had a friend whose family was on the illegal side, and he helped show me a lot of the process as well, on this scale. Because, we do distill at a very small scale. Our mashes are, the fermentations that we do are 600 gallons.
Wow.
The larger distilleries, 12 to 20 or even higher 1,000 gallons. So we're just a tiny bit. So that's a whole different process than when you distill on a large scale like that.
Mm-hmm.
Similar but different. And so it was a little bit of learning with that. I was very fortunate. I had my grandfather's notes. So our recipes come from my grandfather's notes. And we had a yeast jug that my uncle had, that he had donated it to the Oscar Getz Whiskey Museum in Bardstown, Kentucky. And if anybody ever gets to Bardstown, I suggest you go there. It's a great place. It has lots of bourbon memorabilia, Kentucky whiskey memorabilia. But that jug had sat there since the 1970s. And when it opened up, I thought, well, it'd be really great if we could get some of that old yeast out of that jug. I didn't know if anybody had washed it out or anything. But so we took it over to Firm Solutions over in Danville. They're the same company as Wilderness Trail, that brand. And they were able to scrape the inside of that jug and get that yeast strain, get the DNA from the yeast in there.
Wow.
And from that DNA, we were able to trace that yeast. And so we used the same yeast, the same recipe. As a tribute to them, we use an heirloom corn that would have been used back at about that time, which is an heirloom white corn, non-GMO, open pollinated. We were one of the first to do an open pollinated corn like that. And, I feel like I'm a steward for the brand right now. And, but I wanted to pay tribute to them, but there's no way to reproduce exactly what they did. So I just have to do what we can to pay tribute to that.
Okay. All right. So what was your first release?
Wow. Our first release was a corn whiskey, an unaged corn whiskey. So, and it's funny, we won a gold medal that first release. First thing I'd ever come off my still, we submitted it to the American Distilling Institute. Back then we were members there, and we got a gold medal and the best in the class for that corn whiskey. So that was a great encouragement to come straight out and get that.
Okay, nice. So you're on to something. Okay, so we've got all of your expressions here, or some of them. We've got minor case and Yellowstone. Where do we start on our tasting tonight?
If we're going to start with those, I'd start with the minor case. I don't know if you want to try the two other ones I sent.
Yes. Now tell me about these, because these look very special. And I know that you said that you guys have very small lots and productions, but there's these two bottles. There's one's a bourbon, one's a rye. Very. Right. So tell me about what these are. They're single barrel.
They're a little bit younger, so I'd like to start with those because they're not quite developed like the other products. Okay. What we do is experimental batches. So you ask about what I do to learn about my style and different things. So we do small experimental batches.
Okay.
Them in 15-gallon barrels. so they age a little bit more quickly. And it gives us an indication of where the whiskey will be, you know, as it matures. So, and if we want to pursue it or not.
Okay.
So one that we tried this way that will be introducing in a few years is our wheated bourbon, which is a red wheat that we do, 28% wheat. So that we tried that first in the small barrels, had success with it. So then that's when we decided to move it to the
Go to the larger.
Yeah.
Okay, so where can you find these?
They are a distillery exclusive, except for when a liquor store or a bar or restaurant buys one of the barrels. So if they buy one of the barrels, you know, they have that a selection. So each one's a single barrel. So they're all just a little bit different.
Right.
You have a rye and a bourbon.
So where do we start?
Let's start with the bourbon.
Okay.
So this is our bourbon recipe. It's 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malt. Now this is 19 months old, so it's not even a 2-year-old whiskey. But I think it gives you an idea as to where our bourbon will go. You know, you can get a nice upfront flavor with a young whiskey. You generally don't get that linger that just comes from age. You know, that finish, that long finish. So
one thing I would say with your whiskeys, and this is the same with the minor Ks, the aroma jumps out of the glass. It jumps out of the bottle. So automatically I'm getting like really good banana notes. What is that? Almost like bananas Foster.
yeah, kind of like a cinnamon or cardamom type of a note to it as well in the nose.
Yep. It's malty. How much malt is in there? It's got 12%. Yeah, it smells creamy. This is good. Definitely has that corn. It's got a very heavy corn.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get you know, that traditional bourbon, some of the caramel, and that creaminess on the mid palate as well. Mm-hmm. But it is a young whiskey. You know, there's no question about it at 19 months. But I think for a 19-month-old whiskey, it has a nice profile, and you can see where it would go.
I think it's a budding profile on it. I think if it sat in the barrel for, you know, 4 to 6 years, I think it'd be amazing. I'm getting graham cracker on this as well. I'm getting graham cracker on the taste buds.
Yeah, on that about mid palate on that, I think.
Yep, yep. This is delicious, and it's I wouldn't know that it was 19 months. Maybe on the back end, maybe on the finish a little bit, you can tell that it's young. Right. But the flavor it punches you immediately. So I think you're on to something good here. Now, something like this will you, if this is a great experimental series, will you then take this on to another expression?
Okay, so this is our bourbon recipe.
Okay.
So we put some back occasionally when we're running it for the larger barrels. I'll throw some in a small barrel just to kind of see it along as we're going. So
okay.
Yeah, so we'll have this as our bottled and bond. We are bottled and bond all of our whiskey, and it will be a 6-year-old. Okay. So we're waiting for 6 years to release our bottled and bond.
Okay, great. We have a question.
18 months.
Okay, we've got a question from T, who says, when you move the experimentals over, do you combine them into big barrels or start new with the mash bill into the barrel?
Oh, we start it's a bourbon, so it goes into a brand new barrel each time. Mm-hmm. So those 15 gallons, when we dump them, we generally people are buying the barrel, you know, like a liquor store buys the barrel, so we ship that barrel out with that pallet. And if for what we do here, we sell the barrels at the gift shop. So we only use the barrels one time.
So wait a minute. So I could buy a whole barrel of this if I wanted to?
We usually just sell them in Kentucky just because it's hard with the distribution channels, but right. we might be able to do something for your group. So
okay, yeah,
because the 15-gallon barrels are really manageable.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like they're not as expensive, nor do you have as many bottles, so it just makes it more manageable.
I'm just thinking, like, if we took a road trip and put it in the back seat, like, we could get it.
We can only sell a certain amount. So if you have 7 or 8 people, then yeah, we can sell 7 or 8 people the amount that would be in that barrel. So.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. Well, this is delicious. And so this will go into a bottled and bond, right?
Right. Eventually. Just like this. This is 19 months, but we have some in 53-gallon barrels that will be 6 years old that will be our bottled and bond.
And when will that be released?
About 18 months.
From now, 18 months from now. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Because when we first started, we made a lot of moonshine and made a little bit of bourbon. And as we grew, we were able to make more and more bourbon. So our older bourbons, we have very little of. And a lot of that gets mixed in with our Yellowstone Select because we do a blending of ours and sourced on that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
we got a couple of requests for bottles of this, so we might just be able to pitch in and do some stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great little whiskey for sure.
All right. So are we ready to move over to?
Yeah, let's move over to the rye.
I need a spit cup.
So this is our experimental rye. This is a very unique product because it's 100% malted rye. Very few, there's some 95% rye and 5% malts out there, but very few 100% and then malted rye. So it's an expensive product to make because malted grains are about 3 times as much as an unmalted grain. And it's really our most popular that we sell in these small bottles. And it started out as an experimental, but I just keep making it because it's so popular in our gift shop. So
I just want to pause for a little bit. Can you explain just a little bit in more detail? We do a lot of education in BBS. But can you just go into more about the difference between a rye and a malted rye and the process behind all of that?
Yeah, well, the malting of the grain, and that goes with, when we say malted barley in bourbon. So the malting process is actually the sprouting of the grain. Mm-hmm. An unmalted grain is just like a seed. And then what they'll do is they'll soak it so it gets moisture and give it some temperature to sprout that seed. And what it's doing, that seed has carbohydrates in there, and that little shoot needs that to turn to sugars that it can use. So it has those enzymes in there that are creating sugar for that sprout to grow. And what they do is they kill that sprout, and they just have that little pack of grain that's full of enzymes. Mm-hmm. And then those enzymes, we use those enzymes to do our conversion of the sugar in the corn or the rye, that those enzymes convert a complex, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but the enzymes break down a really complex carbohydrate into a very simple sugar that the yeast can use. And it's amazing that people were able to figure that out hundreds of years ago before they knew, anything about chemistry. Right. They figured it out. So that is the process. So Scotch is made from malted barley, so that they take that barley and they sprout it, and then they kill it. And in Scotland, they kill it by in the kiln, and that's why you get that smoke flavor in there. So, but yeah, so that's why there's more labor intensive, and that's why it's a lot more expensive.
Okay, and would you say that that's why it's a little bit more with the starches and the enzymes on it? That's why it's a little bit more sweet and creamy. That also imparts flavor all the way through to the distilling and aging process.
Yes, absolutely. And I tell people, it's kind of like, a malted milk ball or a malted milkshake. You have that malt flavor that's, earthy, but really intense. And that carries through in the grain as well.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it, to me, it gives it a creamier mouthfeel, and you'll get that in this one as well. It's, this one is 14 months old, so this is a little bit younger.
Okay.
100% malted rye, and it's 94 proof.
Okay. I need to go grab another glass or I need to swallow this down really quickly so I can catch up with you. All right. For a little bit lighter hands here.
I cheated. I have 4 glasses, so
I'm not. I just brought one. Okay, let's smell this one. Oh, different nose on this completely.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of the grassy notes from the yeah. Very.
So I often see or smell things in color. So immediately when I put my nose in this glass, it turned like green. My eyes just went green.
Yeah, grassy green. Yes, absolutely.
Like maybe even a touch of green apple in there. Definitely malty. Yeah, the grass, fresh cut, fresh cut.
Fresh cut grass.
Malted grass, right.
Yeah. And it really comes through on the palate as well. You get the spice from the rye, definitely get that spiciness from the rye, opposed to where you got the corn notes from the bourbon. Get that spiciness from the rye.
But it's not overpowering.
No, the malting softens that you don't get that punch.
Pepper punch, right. No, you get this little tingle that, okay, this is a rye, but it doesn't knock you out.
Right.
I reviewed another whiskey earlier for our podcast, and I swear the white pepper on that just completely numbed your entire mouth. It was insane. And not necessarily in a good way, but this is very mellow. This is a mellow punch. This isn't a punch. This is a tap.
Right, and that is from that malting, because that, like I said, if you think about a malted milk ball and how soft and that is, and creamy, and that's what it does with that rye, because rye can be very, very spicy.
I'm even picking up some spearmint notes in this.
Right? Yeah, a lot of people get spearmint on that.
Yeah, not mint, but spearmint. It's definitely. What other notes should I be looking for on this?
I think for me, the fresh cut hay, the green grass, a little bit of the mint, and then the creaminess from the malting is the biggest components in there.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's our best seller in the gift shop.
Really?
Okay. For our experimental series, we always are selling out of the rye.
So is this one going to turn into a larger expression, or will it always stay single barrel?
I think for now it's staying small, single barrel in the 15 gallons. It's, like I said, it's a really expensive product to make.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I wonder what that would be at 10 years.
Yeah.
Like a special release. single barrel 10-year.
I may have to put a barrel or two back just to see.
Yeah, as an investment. Okay, all right. So where are we? Let's stop. Jesse asked if we could have a BBS release. I'm gonna work with him on that, Jesse. Like, Pia's on the line, who we've been working with at with Limestone Branch. I think there's some opportunity here for sure.
So absolutely.
Are there any questions before we transition over into some of the other expressions of Limestone Branch? I just want to have some. T asked if your gift shop still open?
No, we closed that down. We're still running in the back, and we still bottle because we can keep the social distance, and everybody has kind of a pact where we just kind of come to work and go home,
Okay.
and take care of each other that way. But the gift shop is closed, and right now there's no real firm time frame for opening. We'll do with the Kentucky Distillers Association when the Bourbon Trail opens back up. We'll all open back up together, and there's not a time frame as of right now when that will be.
Well, I was supposed to come visit you this weekend.
I know.
So I had members all ready to come out there and spend some time with you out in in Bardstown, and just very disappointed that we couldn't be able to execute that trip this weekend. Right. But we'll get back out there. We're definitely
you'll get back out here, and there's a time when we can all get back out.
Right. When it's safe.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive right back into what's next on our list.
So these other products, now that I kind of teased you with these products because these are just up here in the gift shop. So I want you to come up and get these up here and taste them. But everything else that we have is out in the market, and we're in all the 50 states. So and we can start with the lowest proof, which is the minor case, which you had tried earlier today that you were talking about. Yeah. And so minor case is a rye. It's 51% rye. So the one we tried before was 100%. This is 51% rye. And rye, like bourbon, has to be 51% corn. Rye has to be 51% rye. Mm-hmm. The other 49% any other grain. This one needs to be 45% corn and 4% malt.
Okay, great. So let's get this a pour.
And it's finished in a cream sherry cask, which is very unusual because most people, when they say sherry cask finish, it's a European Spanish sherry. But this is actually an American cream sherry. It comes from Myers Winery in Cincinnati.
Oh, wow.
It's one of their oldest and best products. It's a gold medal winner for them. And we chose, though, it just really complemented the rye. It was also John F. Kennedy's favorite after dinner drink. And it was served in the White House after dinner and at state dinners for the finishing drink. So the Myers 44 sherry. And I think it complements the rye really, really nicely.
Nice. Now you said minor case was named after your
after my great grandfather, whose name was Minor Case Bean, and no one knows where that name came from. I asked my dad. I said, "Dad, did anybody think to ask where that where that came from?" But my cousin, who's done a lot of genealogy, she thinks it's two surnames because there's a case that she believes was in a family, and then a minor may have been some friends, and both those surnames are in the area as well.
Okay.
So I believe it was a combination of two surnames.
Combination. Yeah. All right. I want to see Armand, my partner, loves sherry cask. I want to see if he'll grab his glass. Will you grab your glass and taste this with me? He loves anything in a sherry cask. I've already had it. I think it's delicious. but he hasn't had it yet. He's off camera.
Well, the fur
in a Jim Beam t-shirt.
say all in the family, right?
Right. They're cousins. They're like third cousins.
Yeah.
They're cousins.
The first thing you get with the minor case on the nose is that sherry. You get those dried fruit notes that come that you wouldn't normally get in a rye.
Right. Right. I got that. I even got a little bit of like it's just a lot of sugar just popped up out of this glass. So even like not even sherry, but more like a melon or like even like a cotton candy. It just jumped out full of flavor and full of like all things fun, like all sugary things.
Yeah. But, and cream sherry is a little bit sweet, so you get those sweet notes. But I think it really blends nicely with the spiciness of the rye.
Right.
And I like minor case coming up. I generally drink my whiskeys neat, as just what my idea of a cocktail is putting an ice cube in it, you know. But I generally drink them neat. And minor case is that lighter, fruitier whiskey, which for me in the summertime, especially a hot summer in Atlanta, it's just a nice, light, fruity whiskey, and really nice for the summertime.
I think it is perfect for the summer, especially if you put a rock glass in it. I think the sweetness will come out. This is
right.
This is just
and it makes a great Manhattan because the sherry works really well with the vermouth.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, you can tone the vermouth down, cut the vermouth back just a little bit because the sherry notes come through really nicely.
Yeah, this is really good. And again, the rye is a punch rye. It's a mellow rye that really just you can feel that pepper in the back end, but it's not something that numbs the back of your throat or your mouth. It is just a nice little seasoning note on the back finish of this whiskey.
Right. So
Jesse wants to know, how long do you leave it in the sherry cask?
Okay, so that's a great question, and so that we can maintain a consistent profile. This is the third year, so this is our third release. So we can maintain that consistent profile. We do about an 8-month age, and then we do some lightly aged and blend them together to meet that profile. Because if it just came out of a 8-month barrel, it would be a sherry bomb. And so we use that sherry bomb and then temper it with the things that have been in the barrel for just a short time. And that way you can match the profile every single year.
And so how did you come up with this as you were blending and distilling this and thinking of how this product was to come out? How did you come up with that balance of the 8-month plus a little bit of the newer release?
Well, I knew that we were going to release it every year. So I knew that we'd have to be able to blend to meet a certain profile. And so that way you kind of take some that it's a little bit over sherried, and then a little bit under, and then mix it together to get that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I came up with that. And then I was blending, and I don't think people talk about blending enough, because that's, it's one thing to distill it, but then, to blend it to a profile, that's really an art. And, but I blend to where I liked it. And that you'll find with all my whiskeys that I make what I like. And I hope there's enough people out there that like the same thing that I do. And so far it's been good. So.
Okay. And so we can find this one. This one is readily available?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the retail on it and all that stuff?
It should be around $40.
Okay.
It depends on the states, because each state, the tax is different. We sell it for $49 here in the gift shop, but it should be around $40, somewhere in there. High 30s to low 40s, somewhere right around there.
I have to say, I'm in love with this bottle design.
Yeah, that's really special to me. It's the logo in the center is from minor case, and if you look, there's actually an MC and there's actually a B back in there as well. So a minor case beam, and it came off of his labels back in the day.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, and then the bottle is just, when we were doing the release, I wanted something that looked old school, you know, and I think the package just came together beautifully. It's very reminiscent of the old barback bottles where they would do the porcelain lettering on and then fire it. Very reminiscent of that.
Yeah, that's what this looks like. Job well done on your bottle design.
Thank you.
I love monograms because I don't have a middle name, so I can't have a monogram. But yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so I digress. Any other questions? Trey says $49.95 in North Carolina, grabbing a bottle tomorrow.
All right. Yeah, like I said, the state taxes vary so much. It's hard to know how much it is at each different state.
Before the pandemic hit, Trey went on some bogus shopping raid, not even a shopping spree, some bogus shopping raid in Kentucky. And just like Rick House hopped and picked up as many bottles as he could.
This is a judgment-free zone, Samara.
I'm so impressed with what you were able to do like in 24 hours. But
it was exhausting.
I know that you're gonna love this in your bottle. I can't wait to hear what you think about this one.
For sure. Yeah, grabbing the bottle tomorrow. I'm excited about that.
It is a great whiskey for sure. It's I'm very proud of that, and I think my great grandfather would be very happy to have his name on that. So
excellent. Okay, and last but not least,
so we've got the Yellowstone, and just a little bit about the Yellowstone. Now, my name is Beam, but my mother always said, you talk about the beans too much, because her family were Dance, and J. Dant was a pioneer distiller as well.
Great.
And he started in 1836. He was 16 years old, and his first still was they called it distilling on the log. It was a hollowed out log, and they would pipe steam into it, and then do their cook, and then do their fermentation, and then distill in that same log. And so that was an old time pioneer technique on the frontier, because Kentucky was the frontier at that time. He made really good whiskey though, and became very successful. And J.W. Dant was a great brand. It's owned by Heaven Hill now.
Yes.
Bottled in Bond, one of their bottled in bonds. Great whiskey, but if you can get an old bottle from the 1950s, it's just fantastic. And so J.W. Dant, my mother's side of the family, and his oldest son, Bernard Dant, started Yellowstone. And he had his distillery, and when Yellowstone Park opened back in he started his distillery in 1856, and in 1873, when the park opened, they branded one of the bourbons Yellowstone, and it became their best seller, and it's been on the shelf ever since. So you've been able to buy Yellowstone. You could buy it during Prohibition. You could get a prescription for it, so we know it's good for you. And it's one of the few bourbons from that era that have continuously been sold, through all the times. And we donate money back now from bottle sales to the Yellowstone for the park system, for the National Parks Conservation Association.
Nice.
A park conservation group, not just Yellowstone, but all the parks. And so we've donated over $100,000 to the National Parks Conservation. So we're really proud of that as well.
Now, before you took over the label, who was distilling and producing it then?
Okay, so it stayed in the Dant family, my mother's family, until 1944, and it was Glenmore Distilleries, the Thompson family, and it stayed in their family until 1993. And United Distillers bought it, and then almost immediately sold it off, closed the distilleries down and sold off the brands. And that's when Luxco, it was actually the David Sherman company that became Luxco. That time bought the brand. And from 1993 until we started back and partnered with them in 2015, it was just it was non-distiller producer. So it was just a bottled bourbon, that Luxco source bourbon, and then bottle it. And so that was where it was when we partnered with them, brought it back into the control of the family and myself as a steward for the brand. And then we began blending ours in with the source, and we blend a little bit more each year. And then eventually like I said, we'll have our bottled and bond out.
Okay. But it'll be 100% bottled and produced.
Right.
Because Luxco is out of St. Louis, right?
I'm sorry?
Luxco is out of St. Louis, but is their production still in Kentucky? I know they've got the new distillery.
The distilleries they work with have always been in Kentucky. They work with 2 different distilleries, and now they have their own distillery in Bardstown, Lux Row.
Yep, it's beautiful.
They don't source anymore. They buy. They're making all their own. So eventually, Yellowstone Select will probably always be a blend of theirs and ours, because we don't make enough for a national brand
this big,
as we do with this. So it will always be a blend, but our bottled and bond, of course, will just be ours. So
awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me more. 93 proof.
93 proof, the 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malt. So it's the same as we tasted earlier.
Okay.
This is a blend of 4 and 7 years old. And that's, we talk about, part sourced, and I know I've watched a few of your programs. You've talked about source whiskeys and things, but again, I go back to the blending of it, because you can buy whiskey from different places, but it's in how you blend it. It's the proof that it's put out at. All these different things will make the whiskeys taste differently. So this is a blend of 4 and 7 year old barrels.
Okay.
And that blend, the 4 years, you're going to get more of the grain notes that come through and lighter notes from the barrel. So you get that caramel and the vanillas that come right out of the barrels when you first put it in the barrel. In those first few years, you're going to get those lighter notes of the barrels. Then the 7 year gives that more of a linger on the finish. It gives a little bit more depth as well. And so that blend, I think, works really nicely for a whiskey to enjoy neat. And then it also, that 4 year old gives it enough oomph that it stands up nicely in a cocktail as well.
Okay. I'm getting grassy notes again. What is that? Something rustic. I'm gonna sip and come back to it, but there's something that just like is on the tip of my tongue.
Samara, is this the Yellowstone?
Yep, it's a Yellowstone Select. It's a 93.
Yeah.
Right. That's our flagship, right?
So
Are you taste along with us, Trey? Because I want to hear your thoughts on this. Anyone else? And I know a couple of y'all. Chanel has this bottle too. Yep.
I feel like the description on the back of the bottle is actually probably one of the few descriptions from a distillery that are really, really aligned with the tasting notes.
That's
right?
what it's leather. That's
So
what
you get. I feel like you get like a patinaed leather though. It's not a fresh leather. It's not an aggressive leather.
Yeah.
It's a leather that's been around the block, and that's what I like about it.
That's
like me.
It was sitting on the top of my head. It's like, I don't want to say suitcase, but it's like it's really, it's heavy. It's like old man. It's like, yes.
It's a leather with a story, right? And I like that a lot. Yeah. It's not a new hymnal. It's a hymnal that's been prayed about, prayed over. So that's
He's mad at us because his allergies are hitting. So T, just word to the wise, I have the worst allergies on the block, but especially now, I'm on Flowways at night and Zyrtec in the morning just so I can pick up notes. So you're going to have to follow up.
So I made a caramel last night, and I feel like making a caramel from whiskey really, really did give me like a caramel note that whiskey drinkers could resonate with. And so I do absolutely get that. I almost get a unburnt caramel. I think the notes on the back of the bottle say a burnt caramel or a over caramelized caramel, but I get a sweeter caramel than a burnt caramel, and I really get.
I'm getting like a dark cherry off of this too, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get the cherries.
Yeah. This is
and a little cinnamon.
Tobacco and cinnamon, cinnamon, a little bit of tobacco, just old man, like grown man stuff.
For me, it's a really traditional Kentucky bourbon profile, and that's what I was going for, and I'm really happy that we were able to achieve that.
Colby, what are you getting? Are you back home? Did you get your bottle?
Oh, yeah. I have to agree. The back of the bottle does describe it fairly well. I'm getting all that. That leather does stick out for me anyway on this one. But I do have it is a store pick.
Okay.
Okay. So the store pick will be a little bit different because that's a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And each one is a little bit different, but they're excellent. The store picks that have come out of here have just been fantastic.
So
Yeah,
Brian
it really is.
Brian Robinson is getting some brown sugar, cherry, hard candy, grass on the palate, and a little leather. And I'm like literally check, totally. I'm getting some red hard candy on the palate for sure. And grassy notes that they go from the nose to the palate as well.
Yeah, I think that it's a bourbon that the nose follows on the palate. Sometimes there's a disconnect, the nose to your palate, and I think that this does a really nice job of following through. Because sometimes I'm a little disappointed with bourbons because it has a really nice nose, and then you taste it and it's a little bit flat. But I think that this one really comes through nicely on the palate as well.
Steven, that's like the biggest letdown ever. I've had some bourbons that smell amazing. Like you're like, oh my goodness, it smells so great. And then you taste it and then you look at it like, what is this? Yeah. And so it is the biggest disappointment ever. This one is consistent from the nose to the palate. And we haven't even gotten to the mouthfeel and the finish on this one, but the finish is just so smooth. There's no bite or pepper on the end. Of course, it's a bourbon. This is a real bourbon now, so there is no white pepper note on that finish. But it doesn't give you that strangle of a Kentucky hug either. It just goes down nice and warm and leaves you with a really long, warm feeling in your chest. I love this.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, what are you guys thinking on the finish and on the mouthfeel? Tell me what you're doing on this.
Yeah, I agree. There is it just goes down smooth. There's no bite. And it is the finish. It's a long finish. Mm-hmm. I really like this one.
Yeah. I'm getting caramel notes now. Now the caramel's starting to come out for me. And I'm really just enjoy those caramel on the palate, on the middle of the palate. And
when you're tasting whiskeys, like from the Rick House, and you're tasting them through, some of the first notes that come out of the barrel are the caramels and the vanilla.
Yeah.
And then they deepen and change over time. But a relatively young whiskey, you'll start to get those vanilla and caramel notes out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Samara, I had to rejoin. My computer, actually, my laptop died, but I joined from my phone. So I agree, Stephen. I had the distinct pleasure to taste a few whiskeys directly from the barrel at a couple of different distilleries on my trip that Samara was talking about back in February. And I agree, even the barrels that are a year old, the first thing that jumps out for me out of the oak was some of again, those unburnt caramel or those those really light vanilla flavors. And so I think that's the first thing that oak gives off.
Yeah, you get a lot of those flavors very quickly early on, but to get the depth and finishes and layers of flavor, that's what comes with the time.
I'm just going to continue to sip, so I hope you guys have some other questions to ask.
So, Stephen, this is Trey again.
Yes.
So right now, it sounds like the two expressions that are readily available are the minor case rye and the Yellowstone bourbon. Is that accurate? And if there was to be a third, what would be the third?
The next, we have the limited edition, which we come out with once a year.
Mm-hmm.
There's a different expression. This past year was a 9-year age stated. So it's a great whiskey. Really, really soft. It's almost too soft for me. I kind of partial to the 2017, which had a little bit more of a punch. But this one, in our tasting room, people prefer this one because it is just so mellow.
Yeah.
And then the next year that's coming up is a 2020, which is finished in Armagnac cask.
Oh,
and
nice.
I tasted the first tasting of that a couple weeks ago, and it's absolutely delicious. Really.
And when is that getting released?
That will be this fall.
Okay.
Is that when you guys typically do your annual release or your limited release in the fall? I think that's pretty common.
We generally do it. We've done it for Bourbon Fest every year. So
okay, very cool.
Week of September we start shipping, and usually we'll have a release here like the second week or so of September.
And does that typically go to your standard 50 states that your Yellowstone and your minor case does? Okay, very cool.
Will.
Just in smaller quantities, I'm assuming.
Smaller quantities, and it depends on how much the state sells of our other product, is how much gets allotted to that state. So different states get different amount, but nobody gets a lot. we just don't make that much,
Yeah.
Will you sell it also in your gift shop?
We do have it in the gift shop.
Okay.
And because we've been closed, we'll have this one 2019 too, probably this fall as well, because we got stopped from selling out of it.
So what did you guys? So I know you said, I think you said 600 gallon fermentation batches. So in general, how often are you guys doing that fermentation cycle? So as Samara mentioned, I did a distillery tour in a bunch of different distilleries back in February, and that cycle is different for every distillery based on how many vats, quote unquote, that they have. And so how often are you guys able to do 600 gallons?
We have six fermenters, and we operate 24 hours a day, and each fermentation takes about 3 days.
Okay, cool.
And we ferment at about 86 degrees, and it takes 3 days.
You're giving away trade secret now, Steve.
Well, if you come on the tour, you can walk by and you can see the temperature on our control panel. So, but
very cool.
That's very interesting you say that, because there are trade secrets and there's certain things, but every distillery is different, because every distillery. That's why I say we cannot make, even though I have the same recipes and things. It's like your grandma's recipe. You can't make it like she made it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but each distillery gets its own biome. It gets its own bacterias and wild yeast and things. And since we do an open fermentation, you have those things coming in, and all that provides flavor that becomes very distinctive to a distillery.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about your warehousing. You've got your rick house on property, or where are you located? Are you at the top of the hill? And
Okay, our barrels are all stored at Lux Row.
okay.
So and we are theirs are on top of the hill, and we run top to bottom. So we have we can choose from wherever we run top to bottom, outside wall to the inside. So we have the full range there.
Okay.
And that's what's nice about having a partner that has all those resources that we have a traditional rick house. I really like the Lux Row rick houses. They're excuse me, they're 18,000 barrel rick houses, which is more along the traditional line of the size of a rick house. Now they're building rick houses up to 60,000 barrels.
Oh, wow.
I wonder, I think it will be different. Of course, when you have that many barrels and you're blending, it gives you a lot to blend from. But, part of that whole thing about Kentucky bourbon, cold and hot and expanding in and out of the barrel. So as it gets hot, the bourbon expands and goes into the wood, and then it gets cold and it comes back out. And when you have that mass of liquid, in the center of those barrel houses with 60,000 barrels all around it, I just how much of that exchange you're going to get, as opposed to a smaller barrel house, because that's a lot of liquid and it takes a lot of thermal mass to change that. And
right.
So it'd be interesting. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just different.
Yeah, they are expanding very quickly over there at Luxco, and they definitely have the land to do that over there. But how does are you able to possibly double your production as you continue to grow as a brand by using some of their facilities, or do you have an expansion plan of your own?
Well, we like I said, with the so Yellowstone Select will always blend some of ours with theirs. We did just recently double our capacity, so we went from making a barrel a day to now we make almost 2 barrels a day. So so that's a big deal. But we are talking about getting a larger pot still, and maybe doing up to where we could do up to 10 barrels a day. So still tiny production compared to the big guys, but more than enough, to meet our needs. And I'm not all about growth and being the biggest. I'm quite happy where we're at, and if we can make a great whiskey and make enough money to keep us alive and keep our employees paid and the lights on and enough whiskey to be relevant in the conversation. I think that's important. You have to be relevant in the conversation of the world, and that's what's important for me, and that's where we're at.
Okay, so I just want to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up for final thoughts with our members that are still on the line. You're 7th generation, and you've passed on or have held on to these traditions and brought them to the forefront in this, in our generation, in our lifetime. What's your legacy plan moving forward?
Well, I have no children. My brother has 2 sons and a daughter and 7 grandchildren. So, hopefully some of those will pick up the torch at some point. But we would have been the first generation not to have been in the distilling business. My father was in it for a little while, but got out. And I felt like it was just something that I at least had to pass on to the next generation. Now, what they do with it is their own. That's them. But I didn't want to drop the ball on on our watch, my brother and I.
Awesome. That's awesome. I think that's a great way to end it. Are there any other questions from our members who are still a part of the our group here? Go ahead. You guys can just unmute yourself and shoot out a question if you have it.
I'm muted. Nope, I'm not muted. I thought I was muted this whole time. Sir, I'm not too far from him. I'm like 22, 23 miles. I'm in LaRue County. What do you think about your neighbors around here making the hand sanitizer at the time, switching over to hand sanitizer? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think it's great. You know, we didn't knew that there was enough being made that we didn't do that here, but I think it's great. And Heaven Hill and Buffalo Trace are just pumping out hundreds of thousands of gallons of it now, and a lot of my friends in different parts of the state have done it too. And it's been great that they did that for the Kentucky and the rest of the country as well. Some of
Oh yeah.
It's one of those things that the industry could step up and do something good. In the wars, we always made alcohol for the war industry. For the wars as well. So
yeah.
So pharmaceutical alcohol. So it's just it's great that we were able to do it. It was also great that the FDA and the TTB and everybody came together very quickly and reduced regulations and let things go and made it easier for us to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Steven, I don't have a question. I have more of a comment. This is more of a thank you. So I've got a healthy amount. I won't specify a number of bottles on my home bar, and I haven't yet opened anything from your distillery. What's that, Samara?
I told you he raked it and tapped it.
Oh my God, that's between me and the BBS members. So, but I opened the Yellowstone bourbon tonight, and I very, very much so enjoyed it. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule, whatever you're doing, and appreciate the fact that you spent some time with the members that were showed up tonight. And so
I'm honored to be here. I really thank you for spending time with me. Really, as a distiller, that's one of the things you learn is how precious time is. And if someone chooses to spend time with you, that's really a precious moment. So I appreciate it.
Sounds like the feeling is mutual. Thanks
again.
Everybody
come up when this thing is over or when we can get out. Please come up.
I'm playing rock, paper, scissors with the wife to let me come back to Kentucky after the last trip. So I'll keep you posted.
T, did you have something to say?
I just had a question about, you talked a little bit about how you got into the business back in like 2008, 2011. How did you get that experience or education to get into the business? Did you have to take coursework, or did you have somebody that did an apprenticeship for you, or how did that
a lot. I read everything I could possibly find. I went to the museums and read things out of the old notebooks from my ancestors as well. Like I said, I had a friend who had a small distillery, and I went to work with him for a little bit. And then I had a friend whose family had been moonshiners he grew up in that, and he was able to show me a lot of things as well. So, like I said, on that scale, because when we first started out, we were making them in 60-gallon barrels was what our mash was. So it's just different on that scale, because I have people who worked at big distilleries, but they just couldn't understand that scale. So it's really important to work with somebody who's had worked on that scale as a moonshiner, actually. That helped a lot. But reading everything, I've read everything that I could possibly, and attended seminars. Back then the American Distilling Institute was just getting started, really strong. A great resource for anybody who's wanting to get into the business. So that I went to their conventions and their seminars and different things as well. So like I said, I had a lot of notes from my grandfather and great grandfather, but that would be like getting like I said again, like your grandmother's recipe book. But then you have to find somebody who knows how the little techniques that they might have said, put in a pinch of this or a handful of that, and you're like, well, what's a handful? And
so who do you think gave you the best advice, the moonshiners or the professionals?
Moonshiners.
That's because they're the most resourceful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, when we started out, we were such small batches that, somebody who's used to making 10,000 gallons, when you're talking about making 50 gallons, it's just there's a disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, that's a big adjective that you
Right.
got to use.
Right. Yeah, and that's something I never made anything illegal. Actually, I know some people played around before, but I never did. And like I said, I was really, really happy, that I had a really good friend who was very knowledgeable.
So, Stephen, would you agree or disagree that the hardest part about making a spirit, a whiskey specifically, is the legal process, understanding all the rules and regulations?
That comes to it seems overwhelming at first, but it comes pretty naturally. You learn it pretty quickly, and it's you use the same things over and over again. So it's not like you're trying to go to obscure rules and regulations. So
Okay.
Really the hardest part in the whole thing is doing what we're doing now. Is just getting people to taste it.
Mm.
Making it's the easy part. But actually getting it out there and talking to people and having them taste it and be able to talk about what I'm doing right now. That's the hardest part. And like I said, I really appreciate you all giving me this opportunity to visit with you.
Well, you got connected with the right gal, because Samara, I don't know what it is in the hair and the curls or whatever it might be, but she can get anybody to drink anything. And somehow it tastes better after she's recommended it.
Yeah, well, that's great. I do know one thing. I'm not going to ask where it's made.
A couple more questions. Some of them are silly, but I do want to know, okay, most distillers or master distillers or, distillers who work for brands, they go tipping around rick houses, being able to they've got their honey hole, they've got their special barrels. How does that work when you've got to go all the way over to Luxco and taste your product? Where do you spend the majority of your time between the distillery and the rick house, during your day?
I spend the majority of the time at the distillery.
Okay.
Doing the distilling and barreling. And then, we go every few months and then taste through the barrels.
Okay. So you're not tipping over there to sneak a little sip.
Right. And then my favorite spot is near a window about three barrels in. Seems like it's always a really good, that's midway up, little 2/3 of the way up, about 3 or 4 barrels in from a window, or it's right in there. Seems to work well for me.
Okay, so you definitely have your little honey hole, your little. Okay. The second question. We talked a lot about moonshine. You're from Bardstown. For those that are here on the show and never been to Bardstown, have this thing with the whole bathtub Marys. Do you have?
Yeah.
You do?
No, I don't. I know that they're everywhere in this whole area. This is they call it the Holy Land. That was in late 1700s to early 1800s. There was a huge migration from Maryland to Kentucky.
Okay.
And a lot of that was early Catholics. Maryland had been a Catholic colony and had become hostile to Catholics. And when Kentucky opened up, a lot of them moved. And there's still a reunion every other year. Is the Maryland to Kentucky reunion. And there were so many people that came from Maryland into Kentucky. at that time. Like 500,000 people, I think, moved in Kentucky in that 20-year period. And a lot, and Bardstown, western Marion County, and southeastern Nelson County is a very Catholic area, and that's where the bathtub Marys come from, for sure.
So, okay, so T asked what a bathtub Mary is. We got to get you down to Kentucky so you can see this. But it's literally a bathtub in the front lawn yard, front lawn of the house that has a statue of Mary in it. So is the bathtub for moonshiners? Do they put
Well, no, it was a grotto. You know, when people pulled the old claw-footed tubs out of their house, then they had to do something. But then they could, you know, being resourceful, they're not going to throw anything away. So then you put it halfway in the ground, it becomes this grotto. And if you want to be real fancy, you put rocks over it.
Yep.
And painted it blue. Then
and then you put Mary inside to bless it.
Yeah. So.
But you don't have one.
I don't have one. No, never had. My grandparents never had one. We never had a bathtub Mary.
Not yet. Never say never.
They're actually, you know, when you see them when you're driving through the neighborhoods, it's actually really cute. It's the oddest thing, but it becomes what, you know, a part of the neighborhood, you know.
Yeah, it's just something I grew up with it, so it didn't seem odd to me, you know.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a garden gnome or a flamingo in the South. They're just they're everywhere.
Or like a jockey out in your yard.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my last question, then we'll end it with this. We've got quite a controversy in Black Bourbon Society, and it is just the bane of my existence. But being a true Kentuckian 7 generations in, where can bourbon be made?
Oh, Samara, why'd you have to go there?
Yeah, I knew where she was going.
See, I saw it in her eyes. Her eyebrows.
I tell you what,
I knew it was coming.
I used to get that question from my nephews. They'd call, you know, they'd be away at school, and they'd call, and I would say, take the bet. Bet whatever, put the house on it, put whatever on it, made anywhere in the United States. Because everybody's always saying it can only be made in Kentucky. I said, no, bet whatever you want, it can be made. It's a United States spirit. So that is, but of course, Kentucky makes 95% of the bourbon of the world's bourbon, and we like to say make all the good bourbon, but you know, no bias there.
So Stephen, when I look at bourbon, and this Samara, I'm so glad you said that, because when I look at bourbon, I see it in kind of the middle range of American whiskey, right? You've got spiky whiskeys that have something that is either that sticks out a lot, or you have mellow whiskeys where it just really flies under the radar, and then you have bourbons that are typically in the middle of American whiskey. And so when you see, or when you kind of comprehend the fact that bourbon technically can be made anywhere in the United States, and you've got folks like Virginia or Tennessee or even Wyoming and Utah making bourbons now, how do you think that will impact the variety because of the climate in those different regions? And most distillers, you know, source their grains or their ingredients locally. So how do you think that will impact or influence the taste of bourbon in American whiskey?
But you do get different. I hope it doesn't go too far from, you know, what a traditional bourbon is, but it definitely changes. You know, just like you have different areas of Scotland that have different flavor profiles of Scotch whiskey, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, because I think variety is a good thing. But you know, I'm a traditionalist, and I always like the traditional style of bourbon. I really what I really hope happens is that people in different regions really use the region to reflect what style of whiskey they make. such as, Pennsylvania and Maryland, and now even into New York, where rye was the main whiskey there, and they make a great rye. I think that's, very a traditional, and I think they should embrace that. And I think the Pacific Northwest would be a great spot for malted, for whiskey, because it's just to the Scotch and the climate and the sea and climate and everything. And so I really think the best whiskeys will come from areas that embrace their locality.
Can I get a question in before you go?
Yes, of course.
I know the governor just signed into law that basically you can skip the middleman. You don't have to go through a distributor anymore as far as distilleries selling their bourbon. I was wanting to know if you was considering selling anything, any of your brands online.
Well, we can ship now to any state that reciprocates, and so there's 17 states that reciprocate. They're very odd states like Rhode Island and Oklahoma, and I mean, it's just kind of bizarre. It's just a random states, But so we can ship there. But we still have to go through the middleman. We still have to, everything we sell at our gift shop, everything that we sell, that we ship has to be, we buy from a distributor.
You pass it.
Yes.
So you sell it to the distributor. This is what a lot of people don't know. You sell it to the distributor, and then you have to buy it back at increase from the distributor, and then you're able to sell it.
Right. Yeah, it's
I think the distributor is like the mob. they have such a cushy position.
I won't comment on that.
So Samara, I know there's one other question that we're going to ask to end it, but I always thought that was such an interesting point. So for whiskey to be the first regulated consumable in the United States, I feel like it has been the least progressive in the United States. And so that's super interesting that you mentioned that a distillery, the source of a specific product, has to sell to a middleman that's typically state regulated, or either there's ties to a government entity, is still there. And so I thought that's so interesting, because you would think that the front leader in a regulated consumable would also be the most progressive, but it doesn't seem to be that case in our industry.
No, and I don't even think that's the same for wine. I don't think wine has to go through distributors.
It doesn't. Nope.
Like spirits do.
Yeah.
Nope.
And beer as well. The spirits do. There's a lot of money in that middle. That's why.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
A whole lot. So I think the Bottled and Bond Act is somewhat of it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, the intentions were great, but the execution and the ramifications have not been.
Yeah. I think the Bottled and Bond it works really well, because it got rid of all the crazy
rectifiers. Yeah, the rectifiers,
additives and things. And but the distributorship that came out of Prohibition, and the fear from the government that the mafia would be be involved in that, and so they put that layer in there to keep, but it's to me it's really an antiquated system. Not that we would have a distributor anyway, but when you're forced to have a distributor, it's a little bit different.
It sounds like the mob anyway. When you're forced to have it.
Distributor is like the mob, like 1920s, 1930s. This is Al Capone type stuff. Anyways.
Yeah, there's some great distributors, and there's some that are not so great. So
right, but they're necessary. So you have to play by their rules.
Absolutely.
Our newly appointed Los Angeles ambassador has a great question, and we are going to end it. This is probably one of the longest Whiskey Weeklies we've had, but it's been fun. We did a tasting of 4 different whiskeys, and very informative, fun conversation. So thank you, Stephen.
Oh no, I've had a really good time.
But Dylan, I'm going to let you have the final question, and then we'll close out from there.
All right, so I appreciate it. So just a quick question. So you had a long day. You decided to go home, have a nice dram. Like, what is your go-to spirit?
That's a good question, and it to me, bourbon and whiskeys are situational. Like I said, if it's a warm day, I'm going to go with a minor case, which is a lighter, fruitier whiskey. If it's a cooler day, or I'm going to sit around with a cigar or something, I'm going to do the older whiskey, the limited edition, something with a lot more body and that you can sit and sip and enjoy. And it's not that one's better than the other necessarily. It's just a different situation. Or this is more, savoring and with friends, and this is more, just a relaxing drink on a warm night. And then, for just a regular weeknight or whatever, it'd be like the Yellowstone Select. So really kind of depends on the situation and the company that I'm with as well.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I went ahead and I poured myself a little bit more of the bourbon, the younger bourbon, the limited edition, the single barrel. And again, the first note that I picked up was bananas Foster. So this is going to be my dessert for the day. But truly, thank you, Stephen, for being part of our show. And thank you all, Bourbonites, for these amazing questions. You guys just continue to impress me every single week. And yeah, cheers.
It's a great group, great turnout. Thank you for coming and tuning in. And
yes, who has whiskey left in their glass? Am I by myself?
Cheers. I have some.
I got whiskey in the front.
Yes,
Cheers.
Samara, you are by yourself.
Cheers, guys. We'll see.
Bye-bye.
Stephen, I'll see you soon. As soon as this is over.
Okay, yes, come visit.
Yes, for sure.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night, all.